Hi, everybody. Welcome to Dan on Sports. And as promised, I am putting together a podcast on whether Pete Rose belongs in the Hall of Fame. Earlier this week, he died at the age of 83. He had been at a baseball card show in Nashville, Tennessee, with some of his former Cincinnati Reds teammates over the weekend. And the apparent cause of death is some sort of cardiac arrest. So Pete Rose dead at the age of 83. In 1989, he was banned from baseball. I remember it like it happened yesterday. I remember listening to the news conference. All sports radio was just coming into its own, and I remember listening to the news conference with Bart Giamatti, the commissioner of baseball, who would die just a few weeks after Pete Rose was banned from baseball. I remember listening riveted to this news conference that was carried on WFAN radio. And I could not believe that Pete Rose was banned from baseball for betting on games. So now the question becomes, after all these years, should Pete Rose be in the Hall of Fame? It's interesting, and I'm going to link to it in the show notes. Pete Rose gave an interview about 2 or 3 days before he died, talking about whether he should be in the Hall of Fame, saying he didn't want to go into the Hall of Fame after he died. It would mean nothing, obviously, at that point. He wouldn't be alive to appreciate it. And he essentially said it wouldn't mean anything to his family if he went into the Hall of Fame after his death. Kind of a fascinating interview, because here Rose was talking about his future, how many days he had left, and he would be dead just a few days later. So, does Pete Rose belong in the Hall of Fame? Let's take a look at the credentials, first of all, as far as Pete Rose, because they're pretty impressive, and I'm just going to list a couple of them. A few of them. There's really a lengthy list beyond what I have up on the screen. But Pete Rose had 4,256 hits in his career, more than any other major league player. It was a distinguished career. But he bet on games, and it's very clear in the clubhouse, do not bet on baseball. There are signs everywhere. And I might add, for those who are saying, well, it's a moot point now because you can bet on baseball. Not only can you bet on baseball, the outcome of a game, you can bet on the outcome of a game in the middle of a game. Will the team come back to win? Will so-and-so get how many hits in a game? It's incredible what you can bet on, not only the result of a game, but make a bet, place a wager during a game with all these apps. And it's promoted heavily on these telecasts. My goodness, what ESPN gives you the probability as the game goes along of one team's percentage of winning versus the other team's percentage of winning. So there are those who say, look, the cat's been let out of the bag. Let Pete Rose in. Let's examine this from a couple of angles. One being that there is really no relation between the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown and Major League Baseball. No relations from the standpoint of if Major League Baseball bans a player, that player is automatically banned from being elected to the Hall of Fame. Not at all. The reason Pete Rose was banned from being elected to the Hall of Fame was because after Major League Baseball, after Giamatti's decision to ban Pete Rose from Major League Baseball, the Hall of Fame then stepped in and said, well, we're going to ban him from being eligible to be elected to the Hall of Fame. But Major League Baseball and the Hall of Fame have a symbiotic relationship. They need each other. But Major League Baseball, at least from an outward appearance, now maybe tacitly it does, but Major League Baseball has no outward appearance of controlling what the Hall of Fame does. Hall of Fame actually prides itself on its independence in that regard. But you have veterans committees. You have the Baseball Writers Association that votes players in. There are several ways you can get in to the Baseball Hall of Fame, but none of it through Major League Baseball's door. Again, they're separate, but as I said, they need each other. So they have that relationship. But let's take a look again. 4,256 hits, National League MVP, 3-time batting champ, 3 World Series rings, an all-star at 5 different positions. What else do you need to know? And the big question becomes, when did he bet on games? Did he bet on games when he was a player? Well, according to the Dowd report, he bet on games when he was manager of the Cincinnati Reds, so this was after his playing days. Does Pete Rose belong in the Hall of Fame? And I have gone back and forth on this. I cannot tell you for how long. Back and forth I've gone, wondering, does Pete Rose belong in the Hall of Fame? Does he deserve to be in the Hall of Fame? For many years, I was dead set against it. And you heard people say, well, Pete Rose never apologized if he would come clean. Well, he has apologized. Now, some will say he did it for monetary reasons. He apologized when he published his book. I get that. I understand that. But even in this interview, which I will link to, even in this interview, he apologizes several times and has nothing but nice things to say about baseball commissioner Rob Manfred. But even if Manfred were to lift his ban, and it's a moot point now because Pete Rose has died, but even if he were to lift his ban, or had he lifted his ban with Rose alive, that would not have meant automatic entry into the Baseball Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame would have had to decide should they lift their ban on Pete Rose's eligibility. Here's where I stand. Pete Rose belongs in the Hall of Fame. Pete Rose paid his price, and I have felt that way before, obviously, Rose's death. Talked about it with people. You know, it's a favorite topic of discussion in press boxes where I go broadcasting games for the Hartford Yard Goats. It was a topic of discussion this past season. Does Pete Rose belong in the Hall of Fame? I believe he does belong in the Hall of Fame. All I am saying is whosever hands it's in now, and it's probably in the Veterans Committee's hand now. They've got so many committees now, who knows? But whosever committee has jurisdiction, they should make Pete Rose eligible, regardless of what baseball does. And I understand baseball is very sensitive on this issue. They've been sensitive on it since the Black Sox scandal in 1919. I understand all of that. And they're particularly sensitive now that they have permitted this betting on baseball games, except if you are in baseball. And by the way, baseball is very strict on this, and I applaud Major League Baseball for this. They are strict on not only players, coaches, managers, not betting on baseball, but anybody associated with the game. For example, I, as a broadcaster of Hartford Yard Goats games, and we are instructed before the season, Major League Baseball issues an annual edict, I cannot bet on baseball games. Not that I would. I don't bet. I'm not a gambler. I'm not a bettor, so I wouldn't bet anyway, but that's beside the point. I am not allowed, because I broadcast professional baseball games that are aligned with Major League Baseball, that are affiliated with Major League Baseball, I am not allowed to bet on a baseball game. So it goes beyond just the ball players. And baseball is very strict about this and very sensitive about this now more than ever. And I applaud baseball for that. I really do. But that said, I do believe that the Baseball Hall of Fame should remove its ban on Pete Rose's eligibility. And even though Rose said in his last interview that he didn't want to be elected posthumously, I do believe that the restrictions should be removed and Pete Rose should be put in baseball's Hall of Fame. He's the all-time hit leader. And again, the report claimed that he bet on games when he was a manager. Not that that should change anything. All of those records occurred when he was playing, and on that alone, he deserves to be in baseball's Hall of Fame. That's going to do it for Dan on Sports. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing to the channel. And I invite you to subscribe to my newsletter as well, Dan on Sports. And you can do that by going to sportscasterdan.com or danlavallo.com.